Hi everyone, welcome to or back to my channel. My name is James Feeney. We are here with another monthly favorites video. I'm enjoying doing these and it's nice to take stock of my month and reflect and appreciate the things that I really enjoyed. So without further ado, I will get us right into that. As per usual, I'll start with decks, then I'll work my way into books, and then magical items and lifestyle things. So decks first, then books, then magical type things, and then lifestyle. So I figure most people watching this are more interested in the decks, and so I like to do that first. So we will begin with those. And we have a decent amount here actually. I think maybe more than I have in recent months. So we'll start with an old favorite that made its way back this month and really became a mainstay. This tends to happen in spring, and it is the Tarot of the Sidhe. And I know a lot of people love this deck. I love this deck. I do find that in the warmer months, I work with the Fae energy, the Fae and Fae related decks a lot more. And I actually recently made a video about my fairy or fae decks, the Sidhe decks, and went into that in more detail, but this has been a definite favorite for me. Something about it feels very spring-like and emotive, and yeah, the energy just feels very alive, and seeing as though one of the few things I can do is go outside and be in nature, considering events, this deck and my experiences outside, it just feels really interconnected with what my environment is and what I'm able to do, and so it feels like I'm reflecting on my experience outdoors when I'm using this, and it also just feels very freeing in a time that feels rather confining. So the energy to this to me is it's almost like Sagittarian. Well, I'm a Sagittarius, but that free spirit, that traveling sort of thing, like that truth above all aspect to it, and I really enjoy it for that, and I know many enjoy this deck as well. So Tarot of the Sidhe is a favorite this month. I mean, it's a favorite always, but it's been in use quite a bit this month. Next we will do the Voyager Tarot. It kind of like slides out and then it's just sitting in this holder thing, so that's why it's in what seems like a larger box. And this is by, it's by James Wanless. And I really enjoy the book, the book that comes with this, not just the small guide book, but the larger book that you can get. You can get this off of, he has a website, but you can also get it on Amazon for really inexpensive. I think it's something like $15 or $17. So that's really awesome. I've been enjoying this because it's photo collage, but more real photo collage as opposed to digitally manipulated. And I believe it was created in the 90s. I could be wrong. And so yeah, it's that real photo collage. It's very psychological and reflective and meant to be used for those purposes, and self-growth and introspection, which are very important. These are the backs. And so those things are really central to me, and I've been enjoying using decks that really center around that purpose this month, just because of, well, I'm inside and I think we're all kind of turning inward. And so this deck is really geared towards that, and the book helps to further that. So this is a 78 card tarot, but it follows the suits, although they're renamed, and there's the major arcana, but they kind of diverges from RWS or any known system as far as I'm aware. I'll try to find really awesome examples of that, just in that, say the six of cups is not necessarily going to connect to the RWS meanings. I mean, so we have it's sorrow for the 6 of cups. They all have keywords, but the keywords are gonna really be what defines and makes you think differently, I should say. So it's interesting to work with this system and to realize how different it is, and how different and similar. Some cards are very much aligned with, like we have for the 5 of Wands, oppression, And oppression is a word that I would almost want to pin to the 10 of Wands, at least in Rider-Waite-Smith. So it's interesting that it's on the 5. And so I've had fun. It's shaken me up a little bit in the way that I read tarot, and I don't like to get too complacent with, like, say, a system or assigning set meanings to certain cards. So it's nice to have something like this to shake things up a bit. And yeah, so I've been enjoying that. Definite favorite. And of the same token, I'll skip ahead. I'll skip ahead to Oracle, although there's more tarot to come, but just because this is also by James Wanless, and this is his Oracle deck. Not again, but you can get this on his website or on Amazon. I got mine on Amazon, and it is the Sustain Yourself Oracle. So it comes in this nice little box, although it's not magnetic, so it will fly open. Just know that so your cards don't go flying if you get it. And this is one of those nice larger Oracle decks. I believe it's 101 cards. Yes, 101 cards. It comes with one of these nice thicker books. There is a system to this, and there is a set way that you can go about working with it. It's all very well and thought out. So it doesn't have an option for a really big book like the Voyager Tarot does to get like a nice substantial guidebook. It comes just with this one. But this gives you an awful lot. And the system and the sort of depth that this allows for is really, really interesting. And I tend to like Oracle decks that have a lot of cards in them, so 101 is nice. These are the backs. I will say that this one specifically, the cards are pretty glossy and stick together, so I had to take the time to separate each and every one, which didn't really bother me too much, especially because it didn't damage them at all. They didn't like break off, none of the lamination came off, they all remained very much intact, so it seems pretty high quality, but I will say it can be difficult to shuffle with the way that they clump and stick together, but that's the kind of thing that gets better with time as the deck wears on, and it doesn't really disrupt my reading with it too much. So again, this is a photo collage just like the Voyager Tarot. There are some really cool keywords associated with whatever is going on in the image, so you'll have like water winter contraction. Wow, I wish I could read. I'm trying to like read it through the screen. But it's very, very interesting, and I love the way that the collage is done in a way where you can see the tears, like things weren't cut so perfectly, they were just torn out and thrown together. And there's something very raw and real about it, just because you're seeing these images in such a way, and the combination and the colors really evoke feelings. There's suits of sort of aspects of life, of certain energies, of natural elements. And I love the way that the keyword pairs with what is going on. This one's really cool. Eucalyptus Man for Guardian. It almost creeps me out a bit in a really good way. So I've enjoyed this. There's a lot of reflecting to do when you're looking at these images. You can get lost in them. There's so many elements. The actual names and the key words are almost uncommon, or things that I wouldn't have thought of, like algae and light. And it looks like you're almost within a microscopic image. And it seems very energetic and high vibe, but at the same time, it could just as easily be what you would see under a microscope. I forget what those are called, I apologize. But I've really enjoyed it, and I pair it with the Voyager Tarot because aesthetically they look really cool together, but I've been pulling cards on this on its own and really enjoying it, so yeah, that's a definite favorite. I'm really happy I came across that on the Amazon. With all this free time, I'm on Amazon a lot, and I shouldn't be, but I am. Okay, back to tarot for a bit. We have just 3 more decks, 2 tarot and an oracle. So next I have my Thoth that I trimmed. So I had a larger size Thoth that I decided to trim. I filmed a video on it, so feel free to check that out if you want to see how I trimmed it, so it can be a bit of a tutorial. I think it came out relatively well. I took all of the borders off on all sides down to the imagery, and I used a paper cutter and got really exact with it, and it actually riffle shuffles really well still, which was part of what I wanted. I edged it as well in this sort of walnut color that I think really complements the warm browns on the back, and I think it turned out actually really well. But yeah, I filmed that. It should be coming out shortly. It in some ways as a tutorial, this is actually the first deck that I've ever trimmed, ever, and only the third deck that I've ever edged, so I wasn't that familiar with edging decks either, but the first deck I trimmed, I got really exact with it and wanted to document the experience, so I'm not sure I'm the best person to look at for trimming decks, but I guess I think it was a funny experience. There was a lot going on in that video, honestly, and I guess it showcases a part of my personality that you probably don't get to see as much in many of these videos. I'm laughing, there's a lot going on, it's kind of chaotic, so if that sounds like your cup of tea, check it out when it comes out. But I do, at the end of the day, think it turned out really well, so I am pleased with that. But if you're looking for an extremely precise and helpful tutorial on trimming any decks, I recommend maybe other channels, although based on how this came out, I think my video won't be too bad. But yeah, I'm really enjoying this. I particularly did this for client readings, to use for client readings, because I don't like having the keyword. I like using the Thoth deck, but I don't like the keywords for client readings because, especially in person, there are certain connotations I think that people have with certain words. They see the image, they see the word, and they start to really rack their mind and potentially get worried based on certain words when that's not, there's no need for it. I don't like to have people worry needlessly, especially when how I'm interpreting the card has very little to do with what the keyword is. And so I'd prefer to almost just circumvent that whole needless worrying on for the client, and so that we can really look at the cards and I don't have to maybe talk them down from what it looks like the card could be. And so that's part of the reason, and another part is that a lot of my spreads are larger, or not so large, but they are larger, and it can take up a lot of space to use the larger size deck, but I like the size of the images. So now it's basically the size of the smaller one, but the entirety of it is the image, and so I can do those larger spreads but still have really nice big images to work with and to go on, and it's a more visual experience for myself and, say, a client. So that was my rationale behind this modification, but it's a favorite and I'm really enjoying it so far. Okay, so keeping with the nature of Thoth, you may have seen this if you watched my Thoth Reflections video. It is the Greeny I got, and I'm keeping it in this box. I got a nice box for it actually, and I even keep it like wrapped in this black silk cloth, and I keep it out on my tarot table, and I like to do my daily draws with it, so I'm kind of treating it very, it's actually kind of tough to get out. I'll take a few cards out. Okay. And I'm just really loving it. I love the coloration. It just feels really special to me, and how I went out of my way for it, and the experience of getting it and using it and working with it, and I just love it for that. So it's quite special to me, and I'm enjoying working with it and using it for my daily draws. And a book that I will get to in just a bit is actually I use in conjunction with this. So I'll pull a card from this, and then I will use a book, which I'm going to reference soon, and I will read the page for the given card, and that's how I'm going about reading that given book. So that's been really fun too. It's a nice daily activity to get me sort of in a sense of routine and structure, and to remain a little bit more regimented, I would say, just because I feel like I kind of crave that routine, especially during times like this where I feel like everything is chaotic and nebulous, and so any sort of structure I can implement in my life is welcome, and that's one of the few small things that I see as this like constant in my life on any given day. I know that I will do that, and at the very least that's something that I will do, if that makes sense. So next we will get into our final deck. This is an oracle deck. You will have seen this if you potentially watched my new moon magic video. I used this deck. It's the Journey Oracle from Kelly Fitzgerald, or her YouTube channel is The Truth and Story. So this is the Journey Oracle. I've been using this actually a little bit for divination and card pulls, but more so for magic, and I will very consciously pick cards out of the deck that fit and suit the needs of what it is that I'm doing in a magical working, and I will almost make a grid out of them because it's a hexagram, so you can, or hexagram, hexagon, so you can put them like side by side and kind of create a thing, and I'll make like a honeycomb looking thing out of them, stuff like that. So the keywords and the simplicity I think are really nice, and the little sigils. When I'm using cards for magical workings, I don't want an overload of imagery that's going to distract my intent, my focus on the working. I want it to be just enough to let me know that that's the key word, and to really like keep me in focus. But if there's too much of an image really going on, or too many words, I start to get distracted and it takes away from my focus and intention. And so this is actually perfect for that. And when I saw it on Aquamarine 18's channel when she did an unboxing, I knew for sure that I wanted this deck, and so I knew that that's how I wanted to go about using it as well. And I actually would really like to get the tiles, the wooden tiles, that I think it started as a wooden tile set before it was a card oracle, and I thought that I couldn't get them because I didn't see them on Kelly Fitzgerald's Etsy, but she has a website too, and you can get the tiles on the website. They're kind of made to order, so that's how that works. And there's also a travel size version of this deck, so if you like the size of this, these aren't too big, but I can imagine that the travel size would be really cute and fun. So really been loving this for magic, and to kind of center my focus and to combine them in almost an equation to represent what it is that I'm looking to do magically. So that brings us through all of the decks. Sorry, I try not to make a mess, so I try to put everything back as we go through so that I don't have a big pile of crap on the floor to organize after. So I guess we will get into books. And I will start with that book I mentioned that I've been using with my Thoth deck and my daily draws. So every day when I pull a card from the Thoth deck, I will read the entry for that card in this book. This book, the entire book basically, there isn't much else besides definitions and rundowns on the card, so the majors get a lot. So you'll start with like that. You get the card, the motifs, the various symbols broken down. So we're still in the lovers, and the lovers then gets this page, that page. Most of the majors get 4 or 5 pages. Yeah, this is still the lovers, and we just flipped a page. You'll get astrology, gems, fragrances, quotations from literature, fragrances, writings, Kabbalistic references, I Ching, zodiac deities, myths, analogs, and correlations. So you get a lot. So if I pull a major card, I'm in for like 5 pages of this. And if I get any other card, it's usually like anywhere from 2 to 3 pages for the minors and the quarts. So I've really been enjoying this and reading this book in that way. Although I don't mind reading reference books, I've read a bunch recently, especially on Thoth, and so instead of reading this cover to cover all consecutively in order, I'll eventually get it done just through my daily draws. So it's nice to kind of have that as a study guide, a reinforcing sort of element in my Thoth studies. So I'm really appreciating that. Next, I've mentioned this book before, so I'll bring this one in now. And it's Sheila and I, The Dark Goddess of Sacred Power by Star Good. And I had begun reading this many months ago and was like reading a few pages here and there. And I mentioned it, I think, even in another favorites video, because I'd read maybe like maybe a third of the book, and then I mentioned that I was really enjoying it and slowly making my way through it. But I buckled down this month and I read basically from like a third on and finished it. And I'm glad that I did. I really enjoyed this book. It was not what I expected. While I thoroughly enjoyed it and would recommend it to anybody curious about the Sheila and I and feminine archetypes, deities, cultures, across cultures and through various histories. So I recommend it for that. But I would say a lot of what this covered was not in direct reference to the Sheila and I. So there's many chapters on various similar or influencing female deities throughout other cultures. So there's many chapters, and then maybe at the end of the chapter, like they'll kind of reference like, oh, they're all similar in that they're posing like this, or there's this feminine aspect to them. And then there is, towards the end, it does start to read a bit more like just a feminist text overall, as opposed to a theological or a mythological documentation of a deity or an icon or something like that. And it started to focus on just what it means to be a woman and art, modern art, and how that can carry over. So I enjoyed it for that aspect. I love feminist texts, and I think I'm better for having read it. However, I wish maybe the title was more indicative of what it was that I was going to read, because I would say maybe a third of this book you could condense every part that directly talked about the Sheila and I down to like a third of the book, and then 2/3 were a combination of other female archetypes, deities, and the idea of femininity or sacred feminine overall, which was so nice to read. And if I'd just seen it with a more accurate title, I probably still would have read it, but I would have gone in and not felt a little bit deceived. So now I have another Sheila and I book on the way that I am thinking is actually an entire book pretty much dedicated solely to the Sheila and I. So if you're curious about the Sheila and I, but you also like the idea of the feminine, the sacred feminine, the divine feminine, if you like kind of reading more social justice geared feminist texts, this is a really good one. And then of course the Sheila and I plays a decently central role. So if you want a thorough review on this book, let me know. I do recommend it. I did really enjoy it, but that's just, I would say, something to keep in mind if you're thinking about reading this. Okay, so next we have Michael Newton's Destiny of Souls, New Case Studies of Life Between Lives. So this is the sequel to Journey of Souls, and I mentioned Journey of Souls, I want to say it was 2 months ago in a favorites video, and I still love Journey of Souls. I found myself reflecting on it more so than almost any other book I've read in recent months or even years. So I, of course, went about getting the sequel, and he has many books, but this is the one that's supposed to be almost like a direct sequel or continuation of Journey of Souls. It was written years after, and with like kind of kept in mind certain topics from the first one, and was informed through more cases and questions that were asked. It is larger, and this one I would say doesn't really introduce many new concepts. So Journey of Souls to me was very conceptual. It addressed and introduced very large, broad concepts about ideas of the afterlife, of the soul, the immortal soul, and all that it entailed, as told through hypnotherapy sessions done by Michael Newton. And in this one, you're not given new large concepts. A lot of what has been discussed in Journey of Souls is he goes into more detail, and he's breaking it down and giving you more information on all of those topics. And so I enjoyed it for that, but I didn't enjoy it as much as Journey of Souls. I was hoping we were going to get these new concepts and really go bigger. I would say Journey of Souls felt more macro, and this feels like more of a micro look. So I appreciate it, I enjoyed it, but I found it harder to get through. Plus it was larger, but just the minutia, some of the minutia to me didn't feel so important or necessary. Like I didn't need those details. And there was also parts where he was addressing questions of almost non-believers of this. So like he would go and do conferences and he would reference that, and then he would have these outraged people asking certain questions on certain topics, and he spent whole sections devoted to addressing those questions. And the questions were, I don't want to say they were like misguided, or I don't want to put down whoever asked the questions, but it's like they clearly didn't really believe much in what he was doing. So what was the point in pandering to them in trying to assuage them and answer the questions in this book? I doubt they're going to read this if they weren't already kind of on board after Journey of Souls. And things like, for example, I'll use for an example, he spoke about animals in Journey of Souls and how they don't quite have the same soul, and it's more of this like energy composite, and souls kind of inhabit beings on various planets like humans or like kind of similar beings. Basically, when that species or being reaches a certain level of intelligence, souls start to inhabit the bodies of those beings. And so a lot of animals on Earth and animals and beings that haven't reached a certain level of sentience yet don't have a soul necessarily. But then in this book, it felt a bit like a contradiction in that he was addressing somebody who was kind of almost upset or was really hoping that animals had souls, and he kind of backstepped a bit and started to speak on how, well, they have a soul, but it's not quite like a human soul, and we don't really see them or get to interact with them in an afterlife, and it's more this composite type thing, and other people, other souls and other beings handle that sort of energy and those types of souls. And so yeah, it just was interesting to see. And yeah, I liked this book a lot. I feel like I'm being really critical, but I liked it, just not as much as Journey of Souls. And finally, we have The She, Wisdom from the Celtic Otherworld by John Matthews. And I really enjoyed this one. It's more of a channeling experience. So in this, I'm not sure, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be nonfiction. I could be wrong. But John Matthews is having this experience where he is communicating with the she, and a lot of it is that dialogue and the way that he sees the she. And he's used, I think, fictional names of places for the purposes of not disclosing where he was when certain things happened and where certain archaeological sites are that he went to. I could be wrong, but I believe that's what the case was. And so he has this dialogue with the she over a course of time and sees them as these beings that kind of exist with us in a parallel sense. So there's many ways that people interact with and see the she, and I like how this kind of addressed the various ways that people might view them, but kind of reconciled them all into one, so that no views of the she were necessarily wrong, but none were entirely right either, and I kind of like that. So the way that this came across was really him channeling the she, and the she as a species or as beings wanting, most of them wanting better for humanity and seeing humanity in this time of potentially crisis or at a crux where we could go either way, kind of into our own destruction or to elevation of a sort as a species. And so his communications with the she were meant to be helpful for humanity in a way and instructive. So they're exercises that have to do with consciousness and awareness and interconnectedness. And I love that sort of topic and overarching theme. The fact that there are exercises to me makes it even better because those are fun to do. And so I do recommend this. And he mentions David Spangler, I believe, who has books that are similar to this in nature, where there's that channeling experience, that connection to the she as these other entities and beings that are almost in a parallel existence, not quite physical in the way that we are physical, but also they are. I have more reading to do, clearly, but I just got some of David Spangler's books, and he's referenced in this, and to the best of my knowledge, some of his books are similar to what this is, and so I'm excited to get into those, and I will probably update you guys on that, but really enjoyed this, highly recommended if any of that sounded interesting to you. Okay, we're almost done. Next, magical object. So this would just be some dried lavender. I've been working a lot with dried lavender because I had bundles of it on my altar that I was slowly working my way through, and it was creating a mess. And so I eventually just picked off, or like kind of sheathed off, the actual pieces, I forget what they're called, are they lavender buds, into this and got rid of it so that it wouldn't make so much of a mess. But I used a bunch of lavender in my new moon spell, in this sort of spell I made inside my fireplace that was meant to kind of be a spell for my home and for my family. And so this was the leftover lavender, and I've just been working with it, using it. I really like the ingredient of lavender. It's very multi-purpose for me, and it smells nice. So lavender's been a favorite. I've used it a lot in magic recently. And then my Sheila and I stone that I painted, I showed this in this video I did about like magical objects, like when I went to the beach and found this stone, which I believe is just cement that was worn down by the sea, and then I brought it home and painted a Sheila Nagig, and so she lives on my altar to the Sheila Nagig, or the Divine Feminine, and so yeah, she lives there. and she's been a favorite this month as a new addition this month. So those are some magical things that I really have been enjoying. And finally, the one and only lifestyle type thing I have for this month is a tea, and I mentioned this a few months ago in a favorites, but it's back. So I went through my Earl Grey tea, my favorite Earl Grey tea, which is from Sullivan Street Tea and Spice Company, and I really like their cream Earl Grey. And the last one I had was in a glass jar with a cork top and a scooper. This one that I ordered just comes like this. If you order it in the mail, I believe it'll come like this, and you can get it in various sizes. They have been out of the actual tea bags for a decent amount of months, but you can get the loose leaf tea that's almost always in stock, and you just need the little, I forget if they're called a diffuser or a steeper or whatever it is, to put the loose tea in. And this is my favorite Earl Grey tea. I am like an Earl Grey tea fanatic, but this puts other Earl Grey teas, in my opinion, the other ones that I've had, to shame. So highly recommend this if you like Earl Grey tea and tea in general. Check out just Sullivan Street Tea and Spice Company. They are a little bit more expensive, but I'll say it takes a while to go through this, and it is, to me, worth the price as somebody who really enjoys and sits and sips their tea, and that's an experience that I would spend money on. So yeah, really, really highly recommend, and a big favorite for me this past month. And so that brings us to the conclusion. Those are my favorites. I would love to know what you guys have been loving this past month, what sorts of objects, decks, books, etc. you've been enjoying. I'd like to know what you guys thought maybe of these things, and I look forward to watching other people's favorites as well. I hope you are all doing well and in good spirits. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and until next time, bye everyone.